Welcome to Loyola Marymount University. I am Fernando Guerra, professor and director of the Center for the Study of Los Angeles. We are having our Forecast LA series, and we have had several guests who talk about the current status and some of the history of certain entities in Los Angeles, but really forecast the future of education, water, public safety, etc. Today, we are very fortunate to have two guests who know a lot about water and have had their total professional lives engaged with water. We have Jeff Kightlinger to my far left, not politically, but in the situation. Jeff is the general manager for the Metropolitan Water District of Southern California. He was appointed general manager in February of 2006. And before he was appointed general manager, he was also the general counsel of Metropolitan. I think he started at Metropolitan Water District in the 1990s. Before that, he worked for a variety of different entities and a law practice. He earned his bachelor's degree in history from the University of California, Berkeley, and then he got a law degree from a great Jesuit university, Santa Clara, not as great as Loyola Marymount, but still a sister university up in Northern California. Next to me is James McDaniel, and he is the Senior Assistant General Manager for the Los Angeles Department of Water and Power. And right now, he's actually the interim general manager as we wait for the new appointed general manager to be confirmed. So right now, in these like 30 days, he's the top guy. So we're going to ask him what he's going to do in those 30 days. He has overall executive management and oversight of all the water system. When we think about the Department of Water and Power, it's water and power. He's in charge of the water. He serves on the Joint Safety and Joint Training Institute Boards of Trustees, which has been in the news quite a bit, and we'll talk a little bit about that, maybe if he wants to answer some of those questions. Before he was Assistant General Manager, he was Director of Water Quality and Operations, before that Manager of the Water Systems Operation, before that Manager of Geotechnical Engineering Services, and I can go on and on. He obviously has moved up the ranks and really has touched all the different aspects of the water system at LADWP. He received his BS in Civil Engineering from the University of California at Irvine. So the very first question I want to ask is, it did rain. So is the drought over? What's going on with the current situation? How much more rain or water do we need?
I'll go ahead and start it. This year started off, never seen anything like it. We were so incredibly down. So this storm was actually a very huge storm. It was one of the biggest storms we've seen in decades in Northern California, and it brought us back from a historically shattering bad year to just, we're now tied for the worst year ever in the history of California water supply. So this brought us from just off the charts terrible to tied with 1977 for where we are at this time of year in mid-February, for the lowest year ever in recorded history. So we're at least now tied for the bottom instead of setting a whole new record. So yeah, this storm was helpful, but we got a long way to go.
So how many more storms do we need of this type to get us to normal? And what are you going to do about trying to make it rain?
We've given up on normal. Normal was something we gave up on basically mid-January. Now we're just hoping for a really bad year instead of a shockingly awful year. So really bad is something we're going to settle for.
So there's Department of Water and Power, Metropolitan Water District, and there are all kinds of other water districts. How do you two work together? Start obviously with Department of Water and Power, which predated the Metropolitan Water District. What is your role and how do you interact with the MWD?
So the water side of Los Angeles Department of Water and Power is over 100 years old. Just last year we celebrated the 100th anniversary of the LA Aqueduct. And there's a whole series of historical events having to do with bringing imported water to Southern California. So the LA Aqueduct 100 years ago was one of the first ones. But the City of Los Angeles and the Department of Water and Power were very instrumental in eyeing the Colorado River Aqueduct, and we worked together with other cities in Southern California to actually put the financing together and build that aqueduct, and they did that in the form of a new entity called the Metropolitan Water District of Southern California.
And that's because it just wasn't going to service the city of LA, it was going to service all kinds of other cities.
Yeah, I mean, one of the things that happened when the city brought their water in, there was a big discussion because when you, in 1913, you bring all this aqueduct water in, it was way more water than the city could use. And so there was a big discussion that went on about, you know, other cities, like Santa Monica, Pasadena, Burbank. They were very interested. How about us having some of that water? And the city fathers of Los Angeles at that time kind of did some interesting planning. And one of the decisions that they made was they said, no, I mean, they really had a vision for this large metropolis. And they said, we're going to need that water. We agree that other parts of Southern California are going to need to grow, and we'll contribute financially, and we'll be part of that. But we want this water to remain for the city. So they kind of made that decision that the LA Aqueduct would stay with the city of Los Angeles, and then we would also participate with Metropolitan.
So, I mean, I oftentimes hear the rumors that, in fact, during that time period, you did have many cities that actually joined the city of Los Angeles. Cities like, we now think of them as neighborhoods, but Eagle Rock, Van Nuys, San Pedro, Chatsworth, et cetera. Did they join because of the water, or is that an urban myth?
No, I think especially in the San Fernando Valley, because you had the water coming in at the north end of the San Fernando Valley, so it was kind of discontinuous to the rest of the city. So a lot of those valley areas joined because they wanted, at that time it was mostly agriculture out there, but they did want to have access to the water for agricultural reasons. But yeah, and then a lot of these other smaller entities joined. I think San Pedro, Wilmington probably had more to do with the port development than access to water. But there was some of that. It's not totally an urban myth.
So, Mr. Kightlinger, we talked about the LA Aqueduct that goes to the Owens Valley and comes down and is owned by the city of LA. The Colorado Aqueduct, is it owned by MWD or is it managed by MWD? How does that work?
Yes, it's, you know, and Jim pointed out that the original model had been for neighborhoods to annex into Los Angeles, but with MWD, it was originally decided that the other major cities in Southern California would band together and form the Metropolitan Water District. And so there were 13 cities around Southern California. They formed the MWD, and its mission was to go do the Colorado River Aqueduct. And so Metropolitan owns and operates the Colorado River Aqueduct. And it was quite an engineering feat at the time. It's 245 miles to the Colorado River, all with 1930s technology. And I think the most impressive thing was, you know, they came up with the idea in 1928 when they formed MWD, but they didn't get around to actually the formation. They had to go to Congress. We had to pass the Boulder Canyon Project Act because you had to build Hoover Dam to block up the Colorado River, and then below it we had to build Parker Dam, which creates Lake Havasu. So we had to get two pieces of federal legislation in 1928 and 1932. Had to get state legislation. So all that organizational work took about 5 years. Well, if you know your history, in 1928 things looked pretty rosy in the United States. By 1933 the situation had changed. We were in the heart of the Great Depression. This was a hugely expensive project. Those 13 cities had to pledge property taxes to build it. Their property taxes were about 15, 16, 17% of the entire assessed valuation of all of Southern California pledged to a single project in the middle of the Great Depression, where it wasn't going to deliver a drop of water until the early 1940s. So basically people had to volunteer to tax themselves for close to a decade before they got any return, any water from it, in the middle with half the country's out of work. And they voted overwhelmingly to go do it. It was a real symbol of Southern California's spirit that we're going to get better, we can do this, we understand the situation's going to improve, and we have to have water if we're going to grow Southern California.
So the political engineering was just as important as the civil engineering that brought into creation the Metropolitan Water District. But in terms of, you actually don't have customers at the residential level. Your customers are who?
Yeah, we were set up to be what was called a wholesale water supplier, and so originally we were going to be just serving cities, and so we have now 26 member agencies. We're basically half cities and then half water districts, and what we do is we deliver the water to them, and then they go have the They do the retail side of it and deliver it to the average homeowner. So in some respects, it's very simple. I send out 26 bills a month, and then Jim has to go collect from 4 million people living in Los Angeles. So Metropolitan serves water to 19 million people in Southern California, but we do it at the wholesale level, and then we leave it to the cities to handle the retail side of it.
And the city of Los Angeles is one of those cities.
Right, and then you are just a retailer, or do you also sell water from the LA Aqueduct to anybody else? Or does it stay 100% in the city of Los Angeles?
The water from the LA Aqueduct stays all within the city of Los Angeles. So we are kind of vertically integrated in that we do have a water collection function and a transmission function, distribution, but it's all for the city. We do not retail outside the city.
Okay, so what percent of the water comes from the LA Aqueduct, and then what percent comes from Colorado?
So in the city of Los Angeles, about, and Jeff, like Jeff said, in a normal year, we've forgotten about what a normal year is. We talk about normal years because you gotta pick a number. So think of as a long-term average. In an average year, we would get a little bit more than half of our water now from Metropolitan Water District. We'd get about a little over a third from the Los Angeles Aqueduct, and then the balance would come from local groundwater supplies and water recycling. Now that's a huge change from when I started at the department 30 years ago. We would get 75% of our water from the LA Aqueduct.
So what happened? Is it leaking, or what's going on?
Half of the water that we had traditionally exported from Owens Valley now stays in the Owens Valley for environmental purposes. It's being used to refill Mono Lake. It's being used for dust mitigation on Owens Lake. We've rewatered 60 miles of the lower Owens River that had been dried up when they built the aqueduct. We've mitigated some groundwater pumping impacts. So about half of that water is now staying up there. Even though we've reduced our water demand, we're using less water now than we were 40 years ago, the difference still has to come
Per
from
capita
someplace.
or in absolute numbers?
That's in an absolute number, and we've added 1 million people in that time.
So there are tremendous amount of federal regulations, state regulations, and then local regulations that you have to deal with. The number of regulations that determine what Met can do and what DW can do, who keeps taps of that, and how many are there?
I've never thought to try and count it. It's countless, probably. I mean, they're just walls and walls of regulations and materials and laws, and it's become, as I said, it becomes the biggest challenge now is not so much can we actually design and build it, it's can we actually get the permits to go ahead and do it. I mean, here's a good example. Governor Jerry Brown is pushing together this, what they call the Bay Delta Conservation Plan. As an engineering matter, it's relatively straightforward. It's going to be a bypass in the Delta water system, about 40 miles long. It was originally designed in 1930. It was debated in 1960. The voters turned it down as the peripheral canal in 1982. We're revisiting it now. As an engineering matter, fairly straightforward. It's something we thought of in 1930. To date, we have spent $200 million on the environmental analysis to get a permit. We have generated, it's on the website. Please go look at it and read it and make your comments known. It's in public review period right now.
It's only 80,000 pages.
35,000 pages long.
Sorry.
The analysis to comply
Engineers are
with the
supposed
law.
to be precise.
35,000 pages of materials to review and make your public comments. That is the type of analysis you have to do.
That'll be a class assignment due next week. Okay.
Yeah, Bay Delta Conservation Plan.gov, go look it up.
BayDeltaConservationPlan.gov. Okay.
I don't know if it's .gov, but it's something like that.
They know how to use Google.
You can find it.
Right. And so, so MWD is in favor of this?
We are. Something needs to be done, and it can take the different shape. Obviously, it's an environmental review analysis. It can be slightly bigger or better, but the idea is California in 2009 passed a package of laws, and among those laws it said we support co-equal goals, which is we need water supply reliability and we need to restore the ecosystem in the Bay Delta. And our agency says those are two very important goals. We can't have a functioning economy in California without water supply reliability, but we know we can't have good water supply reliability unless we take care of the ecosystem. And so the concept is co-equal goals. This analysis has been 7 years in the making of how to do that. A lot of debate over whether this is the exact right combination of things to do. 100,000 plus acres of restoration, bypass tunnels, a lot of plumbing, a lot of engineering, a lot of restoration. But when we get to the end of the process, if we ever can get to the end of the process, we will likely support that and try to move that forward.
So how many people live in the 26 jurisdictions that met water services?
19 million people, 1 in every 2 Californians.
Okay, so 19, you service 19 million people.
Correct.
And of those 19 million people, if we didn't have the California, the Colorado, or the LA aqueducts, what could be sustained here with the water that we have locally?
Well, you'd probably get down to somewhere under current technology, you probably 2/3 of the people are living on some form of imported water. So that would mean
Only 1/3. So this region could only naturally support about 1/3 of the people that we currently have.
and that would be a stretch too, frankly, because that's sort of under best case scenarios, and that allows for storage and things like that. So it would be difficult even doing that.
And so obviously Los Angeles and Southern California is a creation of these aqueducts. And so therefore they have to be maintained, et cetera. So did DWP voluntarily stop pumping as much water down south, or were you sued and prevented, or was it a policy decision by the mayor or the council or the commission that said, hey, let's stop taking all this water and let's use some of it up in the Owens Valley?
Well, you're talking about the water that stays in Owens Valley?
Yeah, you have mentioned that we
Yeah.
are taking what percent of water that we used to get from
Right.
Owens, and now it's declined tremendously.
So there's a number of different, most of them probably stemmed out of various court decisions or regulatory decisions. So
So you were sued?
Yeah, the famous one was in the Mono Lake case. The city had water rights in the Mono Basin that to water professionals, water rights are like the holy scripture. Everybody lives and dies by water rights. And what the Supreme Court said back then was that there's this concept of public trust. Public trust. I want to say public.
You had to turn to his lawyer.
That's what the lawyers
I
are
need to
here for.
consult with the lawyer there. The public trust doctrine, and that said, water rights are water rights, but you need to look at basically you need to look at the bigger picture, and that the environmental good that is done by water being in Mono Lake can trump the water rights held by the city of Los Angeles. So we were required to.
Was that
cease
a
conversions.
revolutionary decision, or had previous
was-
decisions been made like that?
It was pretty revolutionary at the time. I was a very young engineer at the time. I remember talking to somebody when this thing came out. It seemed all pretty esoteric to me. I was designing, reinforced concrete or something like that, and somebody told me, they go, "Hey, do you hear that they just lost this big case? I heard all the lawyers are lined up on the ledge, jumping off upstairs." So it was a pretty big deal at the time, and we've been dealing with the ramifications of that. Owens Lake is another example. We had a series of regulatory decisions that required us to control dust on Owens Lake, and we had some very tight time frames to do that within.
So tell us, students, why is it your responsibility to control dust in Owens Lake?
Well, Owens Lake is it's a terminal, what they call a terminal lake. There's a river that doesn't run to the ocean, that just ends someplace. It's called Terminal Lake. Usually terminal lakes are like the Great Salt Lake, Salton Sea, although it had a different initiation point, or Owens Lake, or Mono Lake. So they're fed by streams that have no outflow, so they tend to get very salty, and they turn into these big saline bodies of water. When Mulholland went up there to the Owens Valley, he saw this crystal clear mountain snowmelt river, the Owens River, that was flowing into this saline salton lake that really couldn't be used for any purpose whatsoever. And in that day and age, that was seen as a waste of a resource, and that was something to be, exploited and harvested and put to the good and help develop this growing country of ours. So they diverted the water that would have flowed into Owens Lake into the LA Aqueduct. So that caused water levels to drop precipitously on Owens Lake, and subsequent state laws held that the Department of Water and Power would be responsible for any air impacts caused by that lowered water level.
And so therefore, we're responsible. So
So
the
we're
residents of LA are responsible for the air quality up in Owens Lake.
Yes, yeah. There's many examples of decisions that have been made in the past that, we, as, Jeff alluded to, probably wouldn't do things exactly that way. You had it to do over again, knowing what we know about the environmental consequences. And we now have to kind of go back and kind of pay for some of those
But
past sins.
Mulholland, would it be fair to say that obviously he's a creature of his time, but did he care about environmental issues? Not that he just didn't, they didn't factor those in at that particular time.
I think people like Mulholland and Teddy Roosevelt, they were great outdoorsmen, and they really respected nature, but kind of in a different way than we do now.
The phrase back then was conservationist, not so much environmentalist, and they really believed in preserving the outdoors, but also making use of it for economic reasons and for growth and for people, and people should have the benefit of the outdoors and vice versa. It was similar to an environmentalist, but a different philosophy than we have today.
So, you talked about when the MWD was first formed, it had 13 members. Now there's 26 members.
That's
okay?
right.
And now it includes San Diego.
Right.
All right. When did San Diego join?
In the 1940s, in the mid-1940s, it became very clear that they didn't have adequate water supply there, and we were fighting World War II, and we the largest, one of the larger Navy bases on the West Coast was in San Diego. And San Diego, for decades, had been figuring out how to connect to the Colorado River itself, independently from the Los Angeles region. And finally, the Harry Hopkins, on behalf of President Roosevelt, said, enough debate, we're going to solve it this way. The Navy's going to build half the aqueduct, Metropolitan will build half the aqueduct, we're going to join them together, and they will join that, and no more debate. And that's how it came about.
But you constantly have a debate with San Diego now. I mean, every time I go to a MWD meeting, it's San Diego versus, it seems to be San Diego versus the rest of Met. What is San Diego upset with you about?
Sometimes they talk about the being upset about this historic shotgun wedding, but I think it's really more just a function of water supply. When parts, as Jim mentioned, they have groundwater basins, they have the Owens Valley supply. In many respects, Los Angeles has other supplies of water. If you actually, once you get to the San Diego region, there really aren't groundwater basins geographically. And so pretty much 90% of the water consumed there has to be brought in, as opposed to the Los Angeles, Orange County area where it's half, maybe even less than half. San Gabriel Valley, that whole San Gabriel Valley, they only need about 15% imported water. So they have a very different view, a very scared and nervous view about imported water. And to some extent, they feel that the Metropolitan Water District, based here in Los Angeles area, is not always going to look after their interests, and they have always been a little nervous about that arrangement.
Okay, but I get that in general. What are they specifically asking that MWD do differently than what it's doing?
That I couldn't tell you. They have a many number of asks. Primarily, I think the main issue is they want to continue to be part of Metropolitan, get the advantage of all the water supplies from Northern California, from the Colorado River, and pay less for it because they want the money to develop things like desalination. So we certainly support them doing desalination, but the issue about should they pay less for it is something that most
Pay
of the
less
others...
than everybody else is paying?
They pay what everybody else is paying, but they believe the structure should be reconstructed and, to benefit their area. And it's a constant debate we have over and over again.
And so, so they're just one of 26 members. Are they one of 26 votes, or how do you gauge the voting?
This was also part of our history. We have a complicated voting structure. So we have a complicated membership with 26 agencies. We're a mix of cities and water districts. And then on top of it, we decided to go with a weighted vote, not based on population, not based on how much water you buy or use, but based on assessed valuation of your property. And the reason for that was that beginning when Metropolitan was 100% funded by property taxes. And so it was seen as those who paid the most should have the biggest vote. And probably the biggest culprit in designing this structure was right here, Los Angeles. And in a reasonable way, you would say, at the time, Los Angeles was going to pay the lion's share of Metropolitan's cost as the most developed region in Southern California, but they actually needed the water the least at that time. They knew over decades they wanted Metropolitan water, but they had their own Owens Valley supply. So they kind of said, well, we're going to form this, we're going to pay for it, but we want to have a good vote say so we don't get our money voted on by the other 12 cities to outvote us and gang up and make us spend more money. So that was the trade-off that was made.
So right now, 26 members, LA is just one of those 26 members, but what percent of the vote are they?
We've kind of reached parity. In the beginning, they were almost half, and now Los Angeles is about 19% of our vote. Orange County is about 18, 17%. San Diego's about 17. So the three big blocks are Orange County, Los Angeles, San Diego, and between them, they're almost 60% of our vote, and then the other 40% scattered around.
And so how did Los Angeles end up losing part of its vote? Is just in terms of assessed valuation or by adding new members?
It's assessed valuation, and since we do it out of 100%, even though Los Angeles hasn't shrunk or lost value, other areas have grown.
The other
And
areas have added on, so when you look at the pie got bigger. So our slice was about the same, but the pie got bigger,
Right.
so our percentage shrunk.
And so, explain this to me. So we have some water right in front of us. If I were to have a bottled water, and
Don't do that.
well, Sedesco charged me $1 for it. How much does this water right here that's in front of me cost a DWP? How much would I pay for that?
You could probably get about 750 pitchers like this for $4, whereas your one bottle of water for
$1.
for $1. So that's
Okay,
kind of
so why do we, as consumers, continue to buy bottled water? Why? That's got to be one of the greatest marketing. You're telling me that for like this much water in bottled water, I can have that whole pitcher, and yet I continue to do that. Why?
You know, I think there's a lot of different reasons. There's some issues. It's packaging. You know, people ask us sometimes, well, why don't you guys get in the bottled water business? You have the water. Well, the one thing when you start looking at that, the thing you learn about the bottled water business is that the thing that has the least to do with is the water. It's more about packaging. It's about marketing. It's about, you know, conveying a lifestyle choice. It has much more in common, I think, with the soda beverage industry than with water. But we also have issues where we've got a lot of immigrant communities in Los Angeles, especially in my service territory, and people come from areas of the world where the drinking water was not safe, and they've grown up not trusting tap water. They don't know that it's safe. So one of the things we're trying to do is get the message out and educate people that, hey, you can drink this straight from the tap. This is a great bargain. It's safe. You can save money. For
Right,
your
as a
family.
matter of fact, in mostly Latino or immigrant neighborhoods is where you see that water service where you can go up and fill up a jug, and it just, it boggles my mind why people do that. It's just, it's amazing. So there is a lot of education and awareness program that the Department of Water and Power does. Number one, as we mentioned earlier, for conservation, et cetera, but even in terms of the quality. How safe is Department of Water and Power water?
Well, I mean, our water is perfectly safe to drink. We test our water tens of thousands of times a year. We take samples every day throughout the distribution system. We're testing for hundreds of different constituents. In fact, the testing regimen that is imposed on us by the California Department of Public Health is much more strict than most bottled water testing
So let's get this
regimen.
straight. So, number one, it's a hell of a lot cheaper. And number two, it's a hell of a lot safer. Okay, keep going.
So, you know, the water comes from various sources, but we treat it thoroughly. We've got multiple barrier treatment systems in place, constant monitoring, safe storage, delivery to the tap. So, I mean, and delivery under pressure to the tap. So there's a lot of value added to the water service that we're bringing.
It still boggles my mind. I mean, I think if we looked around the room, I think, I would say at least 20% of the students right now have a bottled water, paying that much more for water. It's just incredible.
We were, you know, for a while there, we wanted to, we'd come to something like this and they'd have Arrowhead water or something on the table.
Yeah, notice
So-
we didn't do that.
Yeah, I appreciate that. I don't do that either anymore, but what we did, with the trap that we even fell into for a while is, we don't want to have Arrowhead water, so we'll put DWP water. So we put bottled water with a DWP label on it. But what we realized is the message you're conveying to people is that that's bottled water and that it's okay to drink bottled water. Even though we were saying, no, this is
did
our
it
water
with
in a bottle just to make it convenient, they were missing the point. So now what I've got is pure refreshing tap, DWP logo, pitchers, glasses, and what we're trying to do is, I notice you guys have them here as these water bottle filling stations out in the hallways, and really try to promote a lot of our drinking fountain stock in the city of Los Angeles has kind of fallen by the wayside. So there's an interest in the city council of rehabilitating our drinking fountains. I'm trying to get us to start installing water bottle filling stations, because a lot of people carry bottles. I also see people they're carrying their own bottle and you need a place to fill it up. So I think that's a really good opportunity for us. You know, it's not a sale for us, but I think what it does is it helps convey, the product, the safety of the product, and that it's a good value. And, you know, I think that's important for us.
So 9/11, terrorist attacks in New York. And then, of course, our imagination ran wild. Everything was going to be a terror target, including this building that we're sitting in, everything. But waterways, especially the aqueducts, okay? So what did you guys do after 9/11? First in terms of the Colorado, then the LA aqueduct. What did you have to, or did you do anything?
No, we did. You know, it was a different sort of wake-up call for us. Before then, almost 9 out of our 10 worries were earthquakes, and then we'd worry about other issues. And now we had to basically think that people might actually go out of their way to destroy a system, try to contaminate the water. And so what we did is we went through a security assessment of all our facilities, and we spent a lot of money. You know, it's what we've done. So we made a list of what we thought were the most vulnerable aspects of it, and then we've sat down and we went through how do we harden those facilities? How do we make sure they can't be attacked, can't be blown up, security, cameras, fencing. And it's been major investment. We've probably put close to over $100 million into that effort over the past decade, and it's ongoing. There was a recent very peculiar attack up in San Jose on a utility infrastructure where people were blowing up, shooting out a power station, and a very concentrated attack. So that's got all those people in the utility business trying to figure out how vulnerable are we and what do we need to do.
So, but, I mean, it's 245 miles? Can you really protect it? I mean, you tell me I can't sneak in there and drop something?
The nice thing about the size of our facilities that most people don't comprehend is it's like a river. You know, these are not small facilities. So someone with a vial of even the most poisonous, it's instantly diluted to non-detect. It would take dump truck after dump truck of poison. For us, the actual vulnerable issues have to do more with some of the infrastructure than with the actual drinking itself, the actual water. But it is something we worry about both aspects of that.
So has there ever been a terrorist or vandal type of attack on the Metropolitan Water or Department of Water and Power system that?
Not terror. We've had, actually a bigger threat to us has been lately with the prices of metals changing we've had people crazy going up to these high voltage and trying to steal the copper and risking their lives to get it. But, things like stealing metal has become a form of vandalism and theft have been more of a challenge for us.
So how much has DWP spent, do you know, on hardening the infrastructure against quote-unquote terrorist attacks?
It's in the tens of millions of dollars for us. We've increased patrols. We've increased electronic security of our facilities. One of the things that water utilities have is we do use chemicals in the water treatment, and we need to make sure those chemicals are properly secured. So we've been investing in that. Access to facilities, it seems to be, we've seen that in Iraq and Afghanistan, the improvised explosive devices and vehicle-borne explosive devices. So those are the kind of things we've been trying to, harden our systems around. But as Jeff said, we did a similar kind of vulnerability assessment. One of the things that you find out is when you're living in earthquake country, a lot of the things that we've done to make ourselves resilient in case of an earthquake also will help us out a lot in terms of resiliency if there were some sort of a physical attack. We have redundancy, we have backup power supplies, we have other things to keep us running. So these things are, will serve us well in multi-hazards that you might run into.
So we talked, obviously I always think the number one threat is obviously a drought, just when it stops raining. Number two, the earthquake. And then what would be number three? Is it some type of a attack? What would be your third most important concern? Or are those your two top concerns? Drought, earthquake, locusts?
Those are our, I think, are the two
What's number three?
major concerns. And then I
San
think,
Diego?
no, not so much a specific number three. I think then you just have a host of other concerns. I think one of the classic things we talk about is educating and educating the public. I used to think of California as a young state in a maturing country. The reality is, we've all gotten older. California is now a maturing state in an aging country. Jim's facilities are now getting on to be 110, 120 years old. Our Colorado River Aqueduct's 80 years old. The State Water Project's 50 years old. You have to go back and redo these and rebuild them. And now we have to educate the public. Your water rates are not just about growth and for new people moving in. We have to go back and rebuild all these systems. And people don't like paying more and more and getting the exact same product. They get frustrated by that. So politicians have a tendency to put it off. Aging infrastructure and the inability to get people to realize they have to invest in that to keep getting what they used to always get is a challenge. That probably to me is a bigger challenge than many of these others.
Yeah, that's what I was going to say was some sort of infrastructure failure, and probably due to aging infrastructure. We had a major failure on one of our these old pipes that had rivets that held them together. They're so old. Up on Coldwater Canyon and Ventura, and it did about $6 million worth of damage just in one break. Well, I've got miles and miles of those kind of pipes. Jeff and I both have a kind of pipe that's called a pre-stressed concrete cylinder pipe that's was a whiz-bang idea back in the 70s where you take a high tensile strength wire and wrap it around concrete pipes. Well, that's great, except sometimes the wire has a tendency in certain places to corrode, and then these things, they don't just leak, they tend to explode. So those
Great idea. That was a great idea.
we're going through and trying to evaluate, and we're learning from Jeff because they had a very aggressive program to go and inspect these things and replace them before they explode. And so there's certain things out there that are fairly, I won't say high risk, but there's something we're really going to have to pay attention and stay on top of, or they can get away from it.
So Jeff, you just have big, gigantic pipes that bring the water to Colorado and then deliver to these agencies, right? You got millions of miles of pipes.
Well, maybe not millions, but we've got about 7,200 miles of pipe in the city of Los Angeles, and so this is the smaller diameter. The pipe that probably runs down pretty much everybody's street has one of these pipes. And one of the issues we look at is how quick are we replacing that pipe? It was built. There was a big slug of it that was built around the 20s when there was some boom town in the central part, and then when the valley got built out around in the 50s and 60s, another big building boom. Well, that first boom is coming up on 100 years old now. The stuff that was put in the 1920s, and pipe, it really depends on what kind of soil it's in, what it's made of. Whether there's other kind of corrosive activity going on. But kind of rule of thumb, you think it's probably got about a 100-year lifespan. So in a perfect world, you'd be replacing your system at about 100 year. In 100 years, you'd replace the whole system. Well, currently, our replacement cycle is about 325 years.
I don't care. I won't be around.
But you might be when it starts going.
Don't spend my money on that. I don't care. We'll probably have a big earthquake or no more rain, and we won't even be living in Southern California. It's so okay. The DWP been in the news lately, a lot. Number one, you have a new manager. Okay. Number two, you spent $162 million to figure out how to charge ratepayers. What happened there?
Well, the 162 is to put in a billing system. We have
162 million, not pipes, not water.
No, it's a billing
technology.
system, right? And we have a very complex rate structure for water, a very complex rate structure for power, and any kind of information system technology platform that you're putting in, they're just very expensive to do. So we're in the process of putting that in. We've had some glitches. I don't know of any. Mostly, I'm familiar with water managers. I think it's even worse with power. But any one of these systems that's got put in that wasn't a painful installation. Jeff's very fortunate that he's got, 28 bills to put out. We've got 1.4 million customer accounts serving 4 million people. So you need a robust system. People expect to be billed accurately and in a timely manner, and we're going to have a system that will do that.
You can actually take your time billing me. I don't mind if you just, it's just, and I don't mind if you underbill me. It's when you overbill me.
But it always comes home.
Yeah. What I don't understand is when you send the DWP bill, not only has water and power, it has all these other charges which have nothing to do with the Department of Water and Power.
Correct.
Why do we dump that on the Department of Water and Power, which only makes us angrier at the Department of Water and Power when we get that bill?
That's a question a lot of my employees ask, and I think we ask ourselves. But the bottom line is we're part of the City of Los Angeles. We're a department of the City of Los Angeles, just like the Public Works Department or a Transportation Department or anybody else. So it doesn't make sense from the city's perspective to have a whole bunch of different people sending out bills for things. So we are also the billing agent for the city.
So what's on that bill? Water, power?
So right now you've got water, power, you've got a sewer charge, and you've got a trash charge. Those are the main charges that are on there. But for instance, because of the infrastructure issues and the treatment challenges on the sewer system, for many customers, they're paying more to discharge a gallon of water to get rid of it than they are for water coming in. And people don't get that, and they make the check out to DWP, so you're thinking, well, that's water and power. But as you pointed out, there are a lot of other things on that bill.
And there's nothing you guys can do about it, or you can't even, I mean, you also have a great, the fact that you communicate with so many people on a monthly basis, you have all kinds of different inserts that you can put in there in terms of education and awareness, and to communicate with, because most of us have to open up that DWP bill.
Yeah, it provides us with a good means of communication. I think one of the things we've been really working on lately is to improve the bill. About a year ago, we really restructured the format of our bill to make it easier to understand. You can kind of separate the water and power part a little easier to see what they are. But we also put more information in there about usage, try to compare to your historical usage, see how you're doing compared to previous periods. One of the things we're looking at going forward is a program where we can compare kind of in a aggregated format so that nobody's confidential information is getting given away. But you can see how you're doing compared to your neighbors. You can see whether you're one of the lowest water using customers in the neighborhood or whether you're the water spendthrift. And the studies have shown that these are very effective. When people see that kind of data, they go, oh my gosh, I had no idea. And they'll start paying attention to their water use, and it can be a very effective water conservation tool.
Department of Water and Power is going to have a new general manager. For many years, it was a pretty stable situation with general managers lasted for a long time. How many general managers have we had in the last 5-6 years?
Well, we've been fortunate in the last 3 years. We've only had one. Prior to that, I think we had 9 general managers in 10 years. So we were going through them at a pretty good clip. Yeah, when I started at Water and Power, the big controversy was, well, is it going to be a water guy or a power guy this time? And they pretty much, and usually it was a guy. And in fact, it was always a guy. And now we're going to have a woman. And she actually has got a long history with the department. She worked for us for 20 years before she went to the city of Anaheim. She worked her way up from clerical through the electrical craft. She was an electric station operator, worked in bulk power. Both her father and her grandfather were career Department of Water and Power people, so we're really excited that Marcy Edwards is coming back to us. In the meantime, she's she went to be the head of the power utility for the city of Anaheim, then took over as general manager at Water and Power, and she's currently serving as the city manager for the city of Anaheim. So I think a lot of that experience is going to be really invaluable for us. I'm really looking forward to her being
And
there.
so the mayor has appointed her as a general manager, but she has to be confirmed by the city council. We talked a little bit about the Metropolitan Water District and all the convoluted governmental structure, but you would think it'd be a lot easier just in the city of LA. In the city of LA, we have a commission that oversees the department, and we call the department a proprietary department. What does that mean, that it's a proprietary department?
The proprietary departments are basically the port, the airport, or Los Angeles World Airports, LAWA, and the Department of Water and Power. And what that means is they have a means of revenue generation so that they're self-sustaining. They're not dependent on the city's general fund for revenues.
And then what's the governing structure? You have,
And then they each have a board of commissioners. There are other departments that have commissioners. I mean, Public Works has commissioners. It's kind of a different structure there. They actually are the only department with paid. They have paid commissioners and each one of their commissioners kind of serves almost as a general manager of a department. But our commissioners, we have 5 commissioners that oversee our spending. Pretty much all of the activities of the department are ruled by are governed by our board of commissioners, with the exception of rate setting. Rate setting has to go to council. And then there's also a charter amendment that was passed a few years ago that gives us the city council the opportunity, if they get a 2/3 majority, they can take up jurisdiction on any decision that our Board of Water and Power Commissioners decides. So if there is something that's politically controversial and there's 10 council members that kind of want to weigh in on that, they can take jurisdiction of that.
and so the commission is not a full, they're actually not city employees. They're just citizens who are asked by the mayor to serve, and they meet how often?
They meet twice a month and they get no pay. So it's a true
Volunteer.
civic service volunteer job, and they put in a lot of hours.
Yeah, but yet they're the ones that make, in a sense, policy for the department, or at least direct policy, and then you guys have to implement that.
That is
And
correct.
it's a very strange system. I mean, we're very used to it in Los Angeles, but if you really think about it, it's
Yeah.
very strange. But, and so not most, like you said, most of the decisions then are made by the commission, implemented by the general manager and others. The city council can, if it wants to, override that, but they need a 2/3 majority. What's the role of the mayor?
Well, the mayor appoints the commissioners, so, you know, ultimately, the commissioners serve at the pleasure of the mayor, and like Mayor Garcetti, when he came into office, he replaced 4 of our 5 commissioners, and so they definitely have an imprint, and we definitely pay attention to what the mayor's got on his mind.
Yeah, so we are at Loyola Marymount University discussing the future of water with Jeff Kightlinger, General Manager of the Metropolitan Water District, and James McDaniel, Senior Assistant General Manager of LA DWP, who's also interim head of, or interim General Manager of DWP. What is the future of water? What's in the future for the Department of Water and Power? What do you see is going to happen in the next 5 years?
Well, you know, I think in the next 5 years, we are going to continue on our program of expanding local water supplies. We realize
What does that mean? Finding water here in LA?
Finding water that's here in LA. So there's three major components to that we're looking at. One is water conservation. Just don't use it. I mean, that's the cheapest water that you can find out there. We need to recycle more of our water. Right now, we have millions of gallons a day of water that are going out to the ocean through sewer outfalls that could potentially be reclaimed and reused. And then the other one is capturing stormwater. We talked a little bit about, you know, what's the how many people could live here if we didn't have all this imported water. One of the areas, and there's a lot of research being done into this, is how could we kind of rethink the infrastructure of LA and make better use of that water. One of the interesting things in the history of LA, we were talking about that, is when LA was being developed, you had the California, or the Los Angeles aqueduct being built, and they had more water from that than they really needed. So we grew into that. Then we had the Metropolitan Water District, again, supplying more water than was really needed at the time. So we had these fantastic imported water supply systems. So people would look at the rain that was falling, and it was a nuisance. It was causing floods. We were in a big real estate development mode. Back then, everybody wanted to maximize the amount of real estate. So we designed a stormwater collection and disposal system that collects rainwater and flushes it out to the ocean just as fast as possible.
Yeah.
And we now find ourselves in the position of kind of needing to go back and re-engineer that to the extent you can in a built-up metropolitan area, and try to capture some of that water and recharge our local groundwater basins, and potentially even capture it, treat it, and use it. So that's the third of our strategies for local water.
So it rained a couple of days ago. I know it's probably hard to figure out, but what % of that water just went to the ocean? 99%, or, I mean, obviously some of it stayed in the ground in terms of lawns and all that.
Yeah.
But in terms of, did DWP capture any of that water?
Yeah, we do, because it had been so dry. There's a concept they call a first flush. So the first rain that you get after a long period of time has a lot of all the crud and the junk in the streets. So you don't necessarily want that going into your groundwater supply. So we actually work with LA County, and we coordinate when we open the gates and start capturing water in our spreading basins in the San Fernando Valley. So we did get some water out of that, but since it was the first one of the season, we didn't get a lot of the beginning of that. Now, normally we would get a series of storms. If we got a storm like today and then a storm next week, we would be capturing almost all, we would capture almost all that we could get that was in the storm channel system farther up. Once it gets into the LA River, you're really so far south of any place that you can put that water, it's gone. So the name of the game is trying to capture it while it's still fairly high up in the mountains.
Jeff, what's the future of Metropolitan Water District in the next 5 years?
Well, Metropolitan began a process in the early 1990s after the last big drought, not the one we're in, but the last major drought we had, of doing what we called integrated resources planning. And the idea was we would look 25 years ahead and develop 25-year plans, and then we'd update them every 5 years. And the hallmark of those plans has been we have to reduce our reliance on imported water, and we look at the tools to do that. That's one tool. Second tool.
That's basically what he just said in terms of let's go find more groundwater.
That's right. And then the second tool is we need storage. We have to be able to, when there's water available, capture and store it to get through these dry periods, because we can do rainwater capture. At Los Angeles, we'll get 14 inches a year, but last year we got 5 inches. There was nothing to capture in effect. So we have to have water to get us through those years when we just get virtually nothing. And that was storage. So we began this process in the 1990. In 1990, Metropolitan sold 2.5 million acre-feet of water to service.
What's an acre-foot of water?
An acre-foot of water is a very peculiar way to measure water. It's roughly 326,000 gallons of water.
So why don't we say that?
Because the math gets too big. So we just say 1 acre-foot as opposed to 326,000 gallons.
Only water people know what an acre-foot. I mean, I kind of know what an acre-foot is, but I still can't get my mind around an acre-foot. Is an acre-foot like as much water as this room?
Think of it as a football field 1 foot deep in water. So the idea was really by farmers. They like to sheet irrigate, and what they do is open up a gate, they'd cover the whole land, an acre, in a foot of water, and then they'd put it down, and that was how they would measure. So that's where it comes from.
It's an agricultural term.
Yeah.
So it's an agricultural term that we've adopted, and at least we've gotten away from the mining inches when we were a mining state, miners inches. So we're slowly updating. So we sold 2.5 million acre-feet for 14 million people in 1990. This year, in a record-breaking, shattering, dry year, where our demands are pretty high because there isn't any local water, we're going to sell 2 million acre-feet for 19 million people. So we pushed down our use by 20% while adding 5 more million people. And, as Jim said, the number one tool, that's conservation. But we've added, we now recycle about 10% of our water from almost none in Southern California. So, you know, other countries do a lot more, but we do more than anyone in the US. So we have really pushed down demand, and then we built storage. We've invested billions of dollars. We built a major, major reservoir out in Riverside County called Diamond Valley Lake, huge reservoir, and
Wait a minute, it's a reservoir, but why do you call it a lake?
because it sounds better.
So can I actually go and
Yes.
and boat on the lake?
You can go boat and go fishing on the lake, and it looks like a lake. It's just, it's in a nice, beautiful valley, and we filled it full of water. It's quite a lake.
Then you're gonna sell that water to DWP for me to drink?
Absolutely. And we have been doing it all year. But we actually don't, we don't,
Okay, I was just like,
we do, in fact, this was quite a spirited debate. We allow motorboats and fishing, but no body contact, no swimming. And the reason for that, it seems, people go, you're kidding, it's a gasoline spewing motor and not people. Well, actually, human viruses and pathogens are incredibly small and difficult to treat. Gasoline and oil is very easy to strip out. So it's people that are the problem when it comes to water. And so the people, the good people of
I
Riverside,
think I've had enough of this conversation.
yes, it just gets worse. Too much information. But we, so we built this storage. And so
So how much did that cost?
this one reservoir alone was $2 billion.
$2 billion to build a lake where we can't go swimming.
That's right. Another $1 billion in a pipeline to feed it. We call it a feeder instead of a pipeline, to basically get water in it. And this was a hard thing for my board to wrap its head around. When, as staff, we tried to explain it to them, where they're saying, we have pipelines, it's connected to our system already, where we built this reservoir, but the idea was, what we have right there could only fill the reservoir very slowly. It would take about 4 years to get it filled with our existing pipeline network. So we said we want to build this tunnel that will move water to it incredibly rapidly and allow us to fill it in 6 months if the water's available. And it's $1 billion, and guess what? It's going to sit empty 75% of the time. So $1 billion investment sits empty. And they said, why do we need this? And we were explaining climate change. We expect, this was in the mid-90s, we were saying we expect the world that we live in to go from lots of snow, steady melt, lots of water supply available, to a very flashy world. 3, 4 dry years, a lot of rain, 3, 4 dry years, and you're going to have to invest in oversized facilities that can capture rain and move it quickly. And our board made the decision to make that investment. The reservoir serviced us through the drought 2006 to 2009, and 2010 became wet, and we actually refilled the entire reservoir in time for this drought. But it was only that $1 billion investment that sits empty 70% of the time that made it work.
Right.
And that's going to be the future for California. We're going to have to really build in climate change thinking into all our facilities. We did make that decision in the mid-90s, and 15 years later, we're pretty grateful for it.
Technology, obviously one of the greatest changes since Mulholland and, the 1930s when we built the Colorado aqueduct is technology. We just talked about $162 million purchase of technology. How has technology changed what Metropolitan Water District does and what Department of Water and Power does?
I'll go ahead and start. I mean, one of the interesting challenges of technology is trying to figure out what to do with some of this information. We've gotten very good at treating water, and we treat it to higher and higher and purer standards. But where our technology has really risen is detection. We can now detect things in water into the parts per trillion. We have no real basis for knowing if it has anything to human health, but now that we can detect it, the urge is to regulate it. Well, to clean up things to parts per trillion is hugely expensive. And so it's a real challenge for us how to deal with this amount of information. How much do we put out to the public that there are parts per quadrillion of human soap now in the water that's coming out of the sewer treatment system that's not being picked up? Do you want us to try and get that last part per quadrillion of shampoo product from Las Vegas that came down the Colorado River?
No, especially for Vegas.
know.
We know what happens in Vegas.
You
It's
got to
like,
remember, when it comes to water, what happens in Vegas does not stay in Vegas.
No.
okay, I don't like that either. Technology?
So I think one of the real exciting things for us on technology is on the treatment side. And I mentioned water recycling a little earlier, and I think Loyola Marymount campus, you guys are one of the premier customers that we have for what we call our purple pipe water, or tertiary water. And that's great for industrial uses, irrigation. I think there's even a few of the office buildings down the hill here that I think can flush their toilets with it if it's plumbed properly for that. But you're kind of limited as to how much of that you can get out, and you have to build this whole secondary distribution system. So
In other words, a
very
second
expensive.
set of pipes.
A second set of pipes. Yep, that's what we call purple pipes as opposed to the regular pipes. So that's pretty expensive. It works in some areas if you've got a lot of green space or a lot of institutional customers. But one of the things that we're really looking at are the direct and indirect potable reuse. And so what does that mean? That's basically taking water and treating it to, taking wastewater from a sewer plant, treating it to better than drinking water standards. I mean, you're running it basically through the same kind of technology that's used to create bottled water. It's the membrane filtration reverse osmosis, where it really almost just distills the water. This is being done currently in Orange County, and they're using that water to recharge their groundwater basins and also to keep ocean water from intruding into their groundwater basins. So this is a way to really truly complete the water cycle. And I think when we look at technology and ways to start making these projects cost effective, this is going to be one of the areas for us. We've got a couple major sewage treatment plants in the LA basin, one down in Carson that the county runs, and one down by LAX that the city of LA runs. I think between the two of those, you've got probably close to 400 million gallons a day of usable effluent that's being discharged to the ocean. So the possibility of directly using that water, treating it to ultra pure standards, and then being able to use it without having to put it into a reservoir or have to recharge it to a groundwater basin, but actually use it directly.
But it's not really an engineering thing, right? Because people, I mean, you would drink it, I would drink it, but then you tell people this came from the sewers, and we treated it really well. People still say, I'm not drinking that.
Well, they're drinking it in Orange County right now.
But you understand I mean, people call it, toilet to tap.
Toilet to tap.
And it's like, just that image, it's just tough.
But I think that we'll always need to have imported water supplies to Southern California, but I don't think that we can continue to have the moral high ground to continue to import water if we're not using the water that we have to the highest possible levels. And I think if we want to continue to live in Southern California, we've got to realize this is a very dry climate, and we're going to have to start doing things like that. You can potentially use the same kind of technology to desalinate ocean water. It's the energy used to use that MF, they call it MFRO, microfiltration reverse osmosis, is pretty proportional to how much material you're trying to separate from the water. It's not really filtering, you're really separating the water molecules from the non-water molecules. And ocean water, you have all that salt, it's a lot of material you're trying to separate, so it's much more energy intensive than using it to treat wastewater. So I think the handwriting's on the wall that the technology, and one of the things that we're trying to do with technology is right now it's okay, the regulations allow you to put that water into a groundwater basin to recharge it, or to put it into a reservoir to augment the water in the reservoir, but you can't put it directly into the pipe. Well, why is that? They want to have a buffer. And everything in water treatment is about barriers and buffers. And so that the science is telling us now is that you can engineer buffers. You don't have to have a natural buffer. It doesn't have to be a groundwater basin. It doesn't have to be a lake. You could design a lake. So how big does that lake have to be? Maybe it looks more like a tank. Maybe it looks more like a pipe. And you need to have the right kind of technology on the treatment so that if one of your little microfiltration straws fails, you need to know that that failed so that you can detect it, you can make corrective action, you can sideline that water until it's repaired. These are solvable problems. These are things that we can do, and the technology is just right around the corner to do that. We're going to have to decide, is that something we want to take on as policy? I think that's pretty exciting.
Okay, so Jeff just talked to us about he spent $2 billion to build this lake, then another $1 billion to use this pipeline that he only uses 20% of the time, okay? Yeah, but he really needs it, right?
I really need.
Okay, why can't we put that money and do desalinization?
We can. You know, these are all
What's the
choices.
future of desalinization?
Well, it's a proven technology. It does work. You go to places like Israel, they are closing in on, by 2020, they're likely to have 100% of all their municipal potable water be desal, and in southern Spain. But it's also very expensive. And it doesn't really get you, it's always a just-in-time type delivery. That's why we want storage. We want some desal to balance out for drought buffers, but you don't want it to be your 100% supply because it's incredibly expensive. It's still 2 to sometimes 3 times more expensive than the Metropolitan fully treated water. It also is incredibly energy intensive, so that's an issue if we're trying to look at greenhouse gas issues, you know, reducing our carbon footprint. It's incredibly energy intensive, so now you have a huge drain on all your renewable power or all your power supplies. It's also one of the complexities of it. Metropolitan system, once we get it over the Tehachapi's, once we get it in from the Colorado River into here, is 100% gravity delivered. Desal's down at the bottom, and people live up coast. So now, in addition to all the power to treat it and turn it into drinking water, we now have to pump it all the way uphill. It's like trying to get a blood transfusion to your big toe. Your body really was not, you know, you want to put it up at the top of your body, not at the bottom, and try to shove it uphill. That's the challenge in desal, another challenge with it.
What's the statistic you quote to replace our imported water supplies? We'd have to have a desal plant every...
You know, the largest desal plants in the world, and they're going to be building one in Carlsbad, California, deliver about 50,000 acre-feet a year. To replace just our state water project water, we'd have to have one every 4 miles between Los Angeles and San Diego, of the largest in the world. So desal is going to be something that does work, but unless we're going to completely industrialize our coastline, it's not likely to be the answer to Southern California.
Amazing. You mentioned Israel and Spain. What are some of the best practices around the world that you think might work for Metropolitan or DWP that you've become aware of?
Well, I think the best practice is what we've done in many respects, and the idea of we have really worked to diversify the portfolio and not overly rely on one issue. Now, this is fairly recent. We were heavily dependent on imported water, and it's only been in the last generation we've really worked to diversify our deliveries and to do more. Recycled water, I think, is really the future. There's still more to go in conservation, particularly in outdoor, but recycled water, I think there's a lot of growth there. And then desal, we can definitely do that. But it really is never a silver bullet. You're going to have a good, varied mix of all those resources.
Yeah, and I would agree with that. But I think probably the biggest thing that I see that really kind of smacks me in the face when I go is the conservation part of it and how much water we use. So we were pretty proud. You know, last year we were trotting out the statistic that City of Los Angeles, on average, our customers were using 123 gallons per person per day, which put us at the lowest level for cities over 1 million people in the country. And you trot that number out in front of an international audience, and they're appalled. And I was at one thing with some Australians, and the guy says, "Excuse me, mate." He goes, "I think you meant liters, didn't you?" And I said, "No, I meant gallons." And he's just like going, 123 gallons? They're using about a third of that amount in Australia and parts in the Mediterranean.
They don't bathe. I'm kidding if there's anybody from Australia. How do they do that?
You know, a lot of it is a lot more consciousness to how water is used outside the home. There's just a different ethic about how precious a resource is, and it goes to a lot of things, not just water. It goes to how the energy is used in other
In
things.
Australia, I mean, we talk about drought. They're like a lot worse than we are. I mean, they have real drought for a long time. It's pretty bad in Australia.
It got really bad. I mean, they went through a mega drought. They went through a millennial drought that they had to make these dramatic changes. And they did get down to in the 30-some gallons per day. But it also meant sort of getting rid of all landscaping, making really dramatic changes. One of the other things they did that we want to take a lesson from and make sure we move into this future systematically is they put about $10 billion in ocean desal. They rushed it and did it all completed within about 5 years, of which 75% of it's mothballed now because they came out of the drought.
Oh, I see.
And
so they built desalination plants because they didn't have water. Then it started raining again, and they're not using the desalination plants.
Because it's so energy intensive and so expensive. So we're trying to ensure that we build some desal, do some recycling, invest in something that's very no regrets, like conservation, and do those things so we don't have $5–10 billion stranded investments. That's the game plan that we want to do. And luckily, I think we have enough time to do that. We don't have to rush into it.
So we have the Israelis are clearly ahead in terms of desalination, and that's for a variety of different reasons, including, national security, et cetera. You talked a little bit about southern Spain, Australia. Other countries that have lessons for us, or do most people around the world live in places where there's actually natural water? Whereas here in California and also in Australia, we ended up settling in an area that we really shouldn't have, and that's what's caused the challenges and the problems.
I think also places like Singapore, where Jim talked about, we're going to get to the spot where we deliver direct recycled water to people to drink. They're doing that there. They've gotten over this might not be distasteful. They're long past that. So there's lessons to be learned as we look around.
I'm going to open up the time for questions. If any of the students have questions, you're more than welcome to kind of ask. I think we're all dependent on water. We obviously cannot survive with water. It's something that we just take for granted. I think that's part of the thing. It's always there. It doesn't seem like it's a challenge like traffic or other things, and yet it's the most important thing. LA would not exist without water. Water is actually the #1 most important resource that we have and that the body needs, and yet we take it for granted, especially here in Southern California. While some of the students who are really anxious because of their grades to ask some questions line up over here, I'm going to ask you one more question. How has the Department of Water and Power changed from when you first arrived? What's the biggest change?
I think the biggest change for us is we were just totally focused on imported water. It was all about imported water. It was about our LA aqueduct supplies. We took our groundwater basins for granted. We didn't pay much attention to them, and consequently now we're paying for that with contamination issues that we're going to have to address in San Fernando Basin. And Metropolitan was there for us as kind of this insurance policy that we had, that we wouldn't really focus on too much. Now we're very interested in what's going on with Metropolitan, both from a supply side, but also from, are we doing the right thing environmentally, and how are we going to be more supportive of developing our local resources, and Metropolitan's, followed suit along that too. So, to me, that's just a big difference. When I first started, nobody was really seriously talking about, there was a little bit of talk about some water recycling, but it was seen as kind of this fringe thing, and now that's a major strategy for us.
Jeff, how's it changed? You 96 you first got to Met?
Correct. The way we've changed, I believe, is similar to what Jim was talking about. We were primarily an engineering-first organization, and it was just all about what are we going to build next? What's the next big project? And now we've really become a planning agency. How can we do resource planning for 25 years out? Whether or not it's going to be something we build, how does it fit into the planning mix?
So in the old days, it was very simple. It's a technical problem. You hire technicians. You know, you could both have the fiscal autonomy and the political autonomy to some extent, and you get a tangible target. Go build this lake, go build this pipe, et cetera. Now it's completely different. It's more of an abstraction in terms of how you have to deal with all these environmental laws, all these different regulations, you know, global warming, et cetera. It's a completely different environment that you have to do your work in.
And that we understand we're really integrated. It used to be Southern California, we would wall ourselves off. Now we have to work closely with Arizona, Nevada, Northern California. It's a big region-wide partnership across the whole Southwest as opposed to really just Southern California now.
Right?
Hi, my name is Lauren Caputo. I'm a senior studying political science. My question is, now that hydraulic fracturing is underway, or fracking in the Baldwin Hills oil fields, how does that affect the water supply in Los Angeles?
Yeah, well, Jeff, he's been playing around with this one a little bit.
Okay. We began hearing about this, so I assigned some staff person to really get and dig into the whole issue of hydraulic fracturing or fracking. And pretty interesting. I mean, for instance, in Southern California, there's been forms of fracking since the 1920s and pretty heavily used since the 1950s. The actual volumes of water, less than I thought, and so not really big in our scheme of things. We never found really proven examples of cross-contamination between what's been going on in the oil fields versus the groundwater basin. So that doesn't mean my board has taken a position of we want to watch it, we want to see it regulated, we'd like to see a little more transparency about what they're adding to the mix of what they're pumping in. But by and large, we haven't taken a position that we're necessarily just clearly opposed to it because there's a pretty decent track record out there. But there's a lot of challenges with the disposal. Once you pump all that water down, then it comes back up and it has to be appropriately disposed of, captured, collected, cleaned up. And so I think there is more regulation needed in terms of management and transparency, but it's not something we felt that we should be just sort of opposed to the practice as a general matter because it doesn't seem to be as destructive as sometimes I see in the media. Exactly.
Good afternoon. My name is Frankie Carrillo, and I have two questions, and I'll go with you, Jim, if you don't mind first. In the recent scare, the recent drought issue here in Los Angeles, throughout the entire state, there's been a lot of talk of just, like you've mentioned, recycling and making sure you monitor what you use. And I've actually heard it for the first time, this gray water, where it's water that comes from your sinks, from the bath, from the either kitchen sink or bath sink, and water that can, even from the laundry, that can sort of be funneled and used for irrigation. You mentioned that 40% of our water is being, in my opinion, wasted on lawns. Is there anything in the pipeline that will either you guys fund or think about implementing for local residents who can sort of take on that responsibility? And for Jeff, excuse me, I'm 39 years old, and I remember when I was a boy, I would drink water out of a water hose, and it was first, part of it was warm and kind of nasty because it was sort of rubbery, but afterwards it quenched your thirst, And I remember that at the time, gasoline was really cheap. And I'm kind of going, I'm sort of aging myself. It was inexpensive, maybe $1. I just sort of guess.
Yeah, you're really old, man.
Yeah, I know. And as time has gone on, water has definitely. Gas has definitely shot up, and it seems that if there's an explosion or there's some sort of scare from the pipeline, oil pipeline, or freight cargo that's coming this way, gas prices go up. And so my concern is when I'm hearing you talk about these very serious issues about what we depend on to live, to survive, water, I think about is there policies, long-term policies that will protect all of us in case of something going wrong and our water prices skyrocketing. So is there something that you can maybe talk about that I can feel comfortable and safe that no matter what, water will be at a reasonable price? Thank you.
Let me take your gray water question first. So I think you did a pretty good job describing gray water. It's basically reusing water from the home that doesn't collect a lot of organic matter. So you wouldn't use any kind of toilet water. but primarily you're looking at shower water, bathroom, lavatories, and laundry. And obviously you gotta have the right kind of soaps and other things because you can contaminate it. So the good news is, in the city of LA, this was just illegal about 2 years ago. So they've legalized it. So now there's a path to doing this. What's not so easy is getting it permitted. So we're still kind of trying to work.
Marijuana, they're big on marijuana, but
That's
they can't
right.
get it permitted.
Got to have a prescription.
Oh, sounds like you know about that.
You're pretty good on this, Jim.
I was looking at his hat. So we're trying to work on these systems. Certain groups that we work with, like tree people, are very interested in doing this. One of the things I think is kind of interesting is tree people likes to work on cisterns and capturing water from roofs and everything. And right now, if you want to have a gray water system and capture those types of water from your house, and you want to have a cistern system and capture your roof, they have to be in 2 separate tanks, 2 separate ponds. We just have not made it very easy for people. So I've got some of my staff looking at some ideas about how can we make this more approachable, how can we lower the cost, kind of make it simple, rather than trying to have some real elaborate system. Let's work on maybe just the shower. How can we just make just the shower work, and then we can build on it from there.
You think about how much is wasted when you turn the shower on and wait for it to get hot.
Mm-hmm.
You know, that's.
So we are working on some of those ideas.
Jeff?
And then the second question about water pricing, it's actually a source of a lot of debate in the water world. Most agencies, like myself, like Jim's, we're public agencies, so by law what we do is we just capture our costs. And so we're nonprofit, we don't collect extra money and then use it for our own purposes. We simply collect whatever it costs to deliver. And that's in itself a form of control. Things do cost more, but if you look at our historic rates, they've gone up about 1% above inflation. And that's a lot of it because there's a lot of capital and, energy's gone up a little faster than inflation. So there's a lot of power in moving water. And so that's been where we are in the public sector. There's a lot of talk that, I know a lot of economists have theories that if we had a much more free-ranging market and people would price it based on what they would like, and you're willing to pay for a big expensive lawn, maybe you pay that versus a farmer. There's a lot of debate that the market would actually deliver cheaper water supply. Most electeds I know and most of the people I think are a little uncomfortable with just a complete open market that, let the buyer beware and the most expensive person get water. Most people feel a little more comfortable, at least here in the United States, at least, and certainly in California, that they prefer sort of a public agency delivering it at cost as opposed to wide open free market pricing.
Well, I'm going to take the opposite from Frankie and say water's way too cheap, and that's why we waste it. I mean, if we made water more expensive, people would then understand that it's a valuable resource. If you think about it, at the end of a crisis or whatever, water is more valuable than gasoline or any other resource at the end of the day. Yet we treat it as it's like almost so little expense. So my idea is that we figure out what it takes for every individual to have water to drink, to cook, to shower, toilet, etc. And you say per person, that's the base. And actually, we'll give you that water for free. Anything you use above that, we're going to charge you like 10 times what we charge right now. And that, I think, would end up with the same amount of money to some. I'm not an economist, so I haven't figured all this is just a theory. That's what I would do. You get this water for free, okay? And the rest, you are going to pay a lot. And then if you want to have a fancy lawn or what have you, you want to wash your car, it's going to cost you a lot of money. What do you think of that idea?
It's similar to something that we've been talking about.
So it's not a new idea?
No, I'm sorry.
It's been around a long
ideas
time.
under the sun, but that first tier of water, we kind of call that the human rights water. Because water is a basic human right, and then we're looking at a little more nuanced version of that, where you'd have a next tier of water for people who have a landscape that's kind of California friendly, native plant type thing. And then that would be at a reasonable price. And if you want to have the English garden or the tropical garden, and you're going to pay a pretty hefty premium for that. And then we have some people that just have no clue, and they just waste water. And then there'd be a kind of a waster tier up on top of that. So that's kind of one idea that we're
That's an
we're-
official category in the
we're-
DWP, people who have no
Could
clue.
be, going in the future. One of the, I was going to comment, one of the interesting things when I was in Europe a couple years ago, I was in the Netherlands and Sweden and France, and it was with other water people, and we're like asking, how much does water cost, and how much do
Really,
people-
that's what, when water people get together,
Yeah,
that's what.
unfortunately, we're a dull bunch. And what we found was kind of in those European countries, water was quite a bit more expensive. It was about 3 times as expensive as what we were paying in the United States for the unit. You know, we had to go through converting cubic meters to euros and all this kind of stuff. But
And
when we
acres
did
of
all the
feet and
math,
all that,
we figured it out. But what we found is 3 times as much, but their per capita use was about 1/3 of what ours was. So when you looked at what the water bill was, the typical water bill in Sweden or France and the other was about what our typical water bill was, which I think is kind of an interesting kind of self-leveling point when we get into water and economics.
So is water too cheap?
I don't believe so, because I don't think you should try to dictate the lifestyle through just pure economics and say, I believe people should use less. We charge what it costs to actually get it there. But I have many economists tell me it's too cheap, people will value it more if you charge more, and then we could use that money for some other reason. And I just said, well, talk to your politician. But I charge what it costs to deliver.
One last question before I let you guys go. A water bond. There's been a water bond proposed at the state that we would all get to vote on. And it's gone, people talk about it anywhere from 6, 7, 8 billion to over 10 billion. Jeff, what's the current situation in terms of, are we going to have a water bond, and what will be in it? And will it be in the November election?
There currently is a water bond on the ballot for November of 14, and it's $11 billion. Most analysts and political pundits are saying that the public is not ready for something that big, having just now beginning to come out of a recession, unemployment still relatively high. And so the smart political thinking is we need to shrink that to the 6 to 7 billion, $8 billion range, which requires a 2/3 vote, and so it takes a lot of consensus. And the way you usually get consensus is you start adding on projects and you get back up to 11 billion. So it's a challenging political process to take money away but still keep 2/3 of the votes willing to support it. The legislature is currently going through that. There is also a lot of debate. Is November of 14 really a good idea? November of 2016, we would be hopefully that much further out of the recession. Hopefully unemployment continue to drop and people be a little more comfortable, perhaps with spending money. And then secondly, it's a presidential election year, which usually has a higher voter turnout, which usually is better for bonds. So there's a lot of political thinking that 2016 might make more sense, countered by we are in a terrible drought and people are concerned about water right now because we're in a drought, so maybe we better just go now. So this debate is currently taking place in live time right now in California. My hope is that we make a decision in the next couple of months and decide what are we going to do this November so we can get behind it and either support it or understand it's moving.
What does MWD, let's assume it's 6 billion. What does MWD get, if anything? What does DWP get?
Typically, we try to stay out of competing directly for funding. We allow our member agencies to do that, and so you really don't see Metropolitan really push for it. What we try to make sure is that there's money in it for recycling, groundwater basin cleanup, things that help all of Southern California. One of the issues is going to be this ecosystem restoration in the Delta. The last bond had $2 billion in it for that. We think that's money well spent for all of California, and so we were a strong supporter of that. And then one of the politically touchy issues is storage, whether or not the legislature should help build a large reservoir somewhere, probably in Northern California, and that's been very divisive too. So those are the big touchstones.
It's the same thing, right?
Yeah, and the city recently passed a position on the bond saying that they support monies for things like groundwater cleanup, water recycling, stormwater capture. So that's what we would like to see. I would say probably my highest priority would be a significantly sized amount of money dedicated to groundwater cleanup. I think we're in a position to compete for that very well. We're very supportive of basically pots of money that are competitively allocated based on the viability and the quality of the project.
Jim McDaniel, Interim General Manager of the Department of Water and Power, and Jeff Kightlinger, General Manager of Metropolitan Water District. Thank you for coming to Loyola Marymount.
Thank you.